Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
So you have spent a career in that executive space and now are doing your own thing with leadership coaching, which I think is so important as I think about, the trends year after year that are the top priorities for HR. Leadership development is definitely a top priority for everybody. What really drew you into making that transition yourself?
Whew, well, I started out in what I call the Web 1.0 world, which was, the PC revolution, if you will. And I was at the time working with a lot of individuals who are technologists and designers, and they created technology, and then boom, venture capital just gave them money. And next thing you know, they're head of a company, similar to the Wild West AI that's happening today, right? And so I would join these startups, and they were leaders that were technologists and didn't know how to lead. And I had had experience in, established companies and public companies. And so I would come in and say, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And, sort of evaluating their strengths and what capacities do we need? What do I need to grow, et cetera, et cetera. So I just sort of naturally had a knack for that. And then in maybe 15, 20 years around 2000, I just got totally burnt out as we all do at some point, right? And I was really thinking of a career change. I always wanted to be a therapist, and really realized I don't think this is really for me, because I really want to work with positive and and I tend to own a lot of people's issues, if you will. So and at that time leadership coaching was just starting, and so I got involved in this and thought, wow, what an amazing, match of my skills of being in the leadership world, and then really being able to figure out how to accelerate the growth and development of a lot of these leaders. And so it was just a really nice sort of map to a great, career. And it was brand new at the time. It was just up and coming. So I didn't really know, um, thinking, oh, this is what coaching is. I've been doing this, so I thought that was really interesting. But then you're also in this of having to sell myself as a coach in a field where people didn't really know what coaching was, and in a domain where I had already been a VP and now I'm sort of a beginner. So it was an interesting journey. But I think that I have, when I think about what my profession is or what my industry is, it's coaching, right? Because I coach in lots of different industries, and I've really been doing this for 20 some odd years. And so has become my second profession, if you will.
I love that. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening who want to do something on their own eventually. You talked about that kind of burnout space that HR can find themselves in. But at the core, most HR people want to help people, right? That's kind of typically why we got into the work. And so there's definitely a component of psychology as we do the work we do. So as you've, seen that evolution of leadership development and leadership coaching, I want to ask you, how do you define the term authentic leadership? Because I think there's a lot of definitions out there, and it does lead to some complexity in how we talk about leadership development and coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say in the early days, before there were a lot of textbook definitions of authentic leadership, it was their personality. How do they show up? Do I like them? Do I not like them? Am I afraid of them? Are they capable? Are they not capable? Do I find myself asking, how did you even get here? So that, but I think over the years now, authentic leadership, I've defined it and I see it as really more self-awareness, and am I self-aware? Do I bring all of the skills that are necessary these days? Leadership has changed so much in terms of much more command and control to, now so much more collaborative and empathetic and people oriented and all those things. And so I literally define it as, are you the ability to be self aware, the ability to recognize what skills are actually needed in this evolving business world, and then how do I be who I am, and yet still and remain true to my values, and yet still, leadership is hard, and still being a leader. So that's, I think I've sort of seen it move to this ability that you really have to understand who you are and be self-aware to recognize what are the skills you're going to bring to truly be this authentic leader.
Yeah. I think about the leader out there who has all the competencies, they have all the strategic skills. They're doing the work to understand, are they being authentic? Am I being self-aware? Do I have emotional intelligence? Here's the tough question though. There are people that sometimes that emotional intelligence or emotional awareness comes pretty naturally for them. It's
Absolutely.
not something they have to. I mean, they have to work on honing some things, obviously, but it's a more natural state for them to be empathetic, to be collaborative, to think that way. For my leaders out there who are really, really good at the strategy, the big picture, the running of the business, but are really lacking in the emotional intelligence, maybe the relationship building or the schmoozing or the ability to, be in a room and build relationships with people that you need to get stuff done, but maybe you don't respect them or you don't, they're not at the same competency level as you. What
Right.
do we say to those leaders who are completely aware they need to develop this skill? But it's not from in my experience anyways, and maybe you have a different perspective, it's not as easy as just picking up a book and reading, "How do I become emotionally intelligent every day?"
Exactly, exactly. It's interesting because I've worked with leaders who it's how do you actually get them to be empathetic or get them to understand? And things that I have done is really sort of tap into that intelligence piece and try to bring it to, from the intelligent standpoint, how would you go about building this? So, sort of taking the skill set that they have, right, and being able to, and sometimes it's, um, be use assessments to understand why you're different than someone else is different, and recognize that they're not connecting on this. And so how would you end up connecting with someone from an intellectual standpoint? I even had one leader at one point said, I put this all on a spreadsheet. And so, who is who and all of that. And this is how I'm trying to build empathy, because I'm trying to figure out who's doing what and who they are and what they need. And I'm like, if that's the way you need to intellectually understand how to build a skill that you may not be so good at, then, that's one way to, if that's what works for you. And I also think it's the, what is it, how is it serving you by not being that way? What are you struggling with by not building those relationships? And if you could take that time to just sit down and ask, how are you? And what do you need? And all of that. And then try it. And if it, then you'll start to see, gee, my relationship is a little different now. Maybe because I started to think about that person in a different way, or I started to see them in a different way. And I think that's the way you'd help them try to build the skills, by trying to get them to understand what's not what's the risk of not being that way. If you're all strategic, if you're all of that, you're going to lose people, because you can't get the work done without the people. So you have to be able to have those soft skills.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna pause us just for 1 second. There was a beep on your end. Do you have something open?
Yeah,
Only because I heard it, so I just wanna note it so that if you have something open, you can close it so it doesn't happen again.
it was probably my email.
But we all have it.
That off, so hopefully you won't hear it. Yeah,
Okay.
great.
I want to really go into one thing that you just said for our audience, if you didn't catch it, and it was, if you're dealing with a leader that's highly intellectual and they need to use something like a spreadsheet to manufacture something that comes more naturally for somebody who's highly emotional, that is a great tool for them to use, and let's not discourage that. I think so often we work with people who are highly intellectual and we try to teach them a model or a way to process this that actually isn't the way their brains work. And they need that spreadsheet. And it's not inauthentic. It's authentic to them. It's their authentic leadership. So I'm curious, the space and the research that you've done around neuroscience, how has that kind of influenced this approach you're taking to coaching?
So I haven't studied neuroscience as part of the coaching, but I do understand how the brain works, right? And when we get into conversations about when leaders say, "I can't do that," "I don't know how to do that," my response is, "That's your brain talking." Because your brain is wired that certain way. And your brain is always going to tell you, no, 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 you don't want to go there. Worry, worry, danger, danger. And so we naturally just assume that. So your role is to trick your brain and to really rewire all of that by recognizing it's the brain telling you, I can't do that. I mean, even just a simple, technique is you want to, you know, start jogging in the morning, but your brain's saying, no, 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 I don't, that's too hard. We don't want to do that. Right. And so, what are the little things you can do to overcome what your brain is? Well, maybe the first step is just go buy a new pair of tennis shoes or running shoes and then put your running shoes on. And that's going to tell your brain, oh, okay, well, this is kind of fun. And then next thing you know, your brain was thinking, well, that's not too hard. I can do that. So I just go back to, that's your brain telling you no, you can't. How can we trick your brain? And how can we rewire all of that so that you can really understand what is preventing you, right? From really saying I can't do this or I can't do that or I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that.
I love the shoe example. For those of us in the world who are navigating with ADHD, including me, one of the tricks that I have found is putting shoes on in the morning helps me start my day. And it's like, okay, I'm in working mode. I have my shoes on. And then when I take off my shoes, right, I can kind of, that's my time to relax, whatever. So, yeah, absolutely. Find the things that can kind of trick your brain or create those habits that help you think about it differently. You know, one of the things that came to light as you were talking about that is the stories that we tell ourselves, right? The stories that our brain tells us, and it lands us into this space where we've termed it imposter syndrome. I to be honest, I absolutely hate that term
Well,
because let's be real, until you've mastered something, we're all practicing, right? It's practice mode. I really wish people would think about it differently because until you've mastered that skill, we're all imposters. We're all practicing it. We're all trying it. How do we get leaders to think differently about that so that they hear the fear, they hear the I don't know if I can do this, but it's like everybody has gone through that to get to the mastery level.
exactly. It's interesting, I think, when you think about imposter syndrome or just this, a lot of it does come from our history. A lot of it does come from our brain, right? And what we've experienced and the boundaries that we've put up because of that. But I think when it comes to leaders with imposter syndrome, how can you not today, no matter how experienced of a leader you are, because we're entering territory that we've never entered into before. So if you've never been there and you've never done that, no matter how experienced you are, of course you're going to get, doubts about, can I do this? Can I take this on? It's interesting. Corn Ferry did a survey of like, I think it was 400,000 professionals and even CEOs. I would say about 50% of the CEOs claimed they had imposter syndrome. And it's not that they didn't feel confident, it felt like there's so much coming at them, so much, and at the same time. And so then they get stuck not knowing what to do. I think the opportunity is, and this even goes back to that authentic leadership that we talked about, this idea of being able to say, I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know. In fact, we want leaders to say, I don't always know, because that shows the authenticity and the reality. So being able to say, I don't know, but I'm confident that I can figure this out. And I have a team, I have people, I can listen, I can think, I can use all those other skills to help me get there. And so I think it's about using your team, or using the other skills that help you sort of negate the worry or the fear that you're having on, I may not know all of this. I may not have all of the answers. Does that
Well,
make
and I
sense?
think that that feedback probably plays a big part in that, in the feedback you've received over the years, and even the feedback that you give others. So if you're in a leadership position, how have you taught those leaders that importance of feedback and how to deliver it effectively?
Yeah. So there's a lot of leaders who don't do feedback, particularly at higher levels, because they don't think they need it.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I've been there. I've done this before. I know what to do. I don't naturally, I don't need the feedback. I look at feedback as a way to sort of map your internal and your external, your self awareness that we talked about, because we have an internal self awareness. We know what we're good at. We know what our values are. We know all those things. But does it map to the way the world sees you? And so when you go ask for feedback, and you get the feedback that may not map to what you think, then it's like, oh, okay, if that's how I'm showing up, or if that's how I'm seeing. So I think it's number one important to always be looking for that feedback, and then acting on it as well. And in terms of how to deliver it, I think about a couple different things. I think there's one way you can deliver feedback that is um, inarguable and authentic. When you did this, I felt this way. Or when you said that, I felt this way. You can't argue with how I feel, because that's true and that's authentic to me, right? So it's being able to deliver it in a way that it doesn't feel personal, but it gets leaders to recognize the impact that they're having on others because of the way they're coming across. Or based on my experience, and based on what I've done, and based on the way we've handled this before, like laying out facts, and sharing things that are true, so that the leader can say, oh, it's not about me. What you're just telling me is what I see to be true. So it doesn't have, and right away when we get feedback, our first reaction is be defensive about it, right? Because as effective leaders, we're perfectionists, and we don't want to hear that. And when we do hear it, it feels like, oh, right. But then someone once said to me, wouldn't you want to know that that's out there? Right. So I think being able to be realistic and doing it in what's true for me, and how can it be based on criteria or experience or whatever, are ways to lessen the blow, if you will, and getting leaders to recognize, wow, this is really helpful because I didn't see that. And thank you for telling me that. I also think it's also key to, when other people give you assessments or give you feedback, they're going to give you feedback based on things that are important to them. If I'm a real detailed oriented person, I may assess you as not paying attention to details, right? And so we sort of see ourselves in the way we how others in terms of what's important to us. So when you get assessments like that, it's important to say, interesting, recognizing it's just an assessment. It's someone's point of view. How true is this? How does this serve me? Is this something that I can take on? Is this something that's important? Well, no, thank you for sharing that. It doesn't serve me right now, but I appreciate it. Versus, wow, I had never seen it that way. That doesn't map to, thank you for sharing that. And it's important. So being able to recognize, again, it's someone's assessment, and you don't have to, it's not the word, but it's a perspective. And we all need to build our perspectives in order to remain relevant and curious and all of that.
And to be a good leader, you have to build that board of directors for yourself. That's not a new leadership concept, but the thing that I think is missing, and you hit the nail on the head with it, is that board of directors shouldn't all be the people who are above you necessarily. There
Absolutely.
also should be people in that board of directors who either are your direct reports, or maybe it's one downline, or maybe it's somebody more junior in their career, to give you that perspective of how you show up, how you're presenting yourself in some of these important communications that our executive leaders have to sit and fit in. Because you do lose a sense of um, being a person of the people, for lack of better description,
Mhm.
as you climb the corporate ladder from a perspective of, things you're in charge of. You don't necessarily have the luxury, in all honesty, of spending all this intellectual energy, thinking about things that are impacting your employees at the most early levels of their career, because you're trying to drive the business. And it's complex. So I'm not letting anybody off the hook here, but there is complexity to it. So you do need to make sure that that board of directors has all those different perspectives, so that you can get genuine, honest feedback about the things that you're delivering. As we wrap our conversation, I guess I would ask you, one is, one thing in the leadership space that you kind of want to break a myth from, and you really wish, leaders would stop doing this, and focus on this one thing to be better leaders overall.
Stop feeling like they have to have all the answers, and they, because I'm the leader, I have to know. I have to be right. I have you are accountable. You have the responsibility, but that doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers. That's where it does get to the point about using your board of directors, you getting those different perspectives at different levels. How, we talk about different levels in the or different generations in the workforce, and it's really important for me to understand what are other generations thinking, because I hear things today that I didn't know that was a trend, right? And if your workforce is going to be a large part of that, then you need to be able to hear that perspective. So I think this idea of I have to have all the answers, I have to be right, is a horrible myth, because it's more about saying I don't know, but I'm curious. And I don't know, but my experience tells me this is what we might be able to do. But let's, give me your perspective so that I can make the right decisions. So that's what I wish would happen is that people don't always have to think the leader has to be right all the time.
Love it. Such great advice, Loretta. Thank you for sitting down with me and having this chat.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.